Jake had never lived with strangers before. Growing up, it was just him and his mom in their small apartment. Now, at 20 years old, he found himself standing in front of an old 3-story house that would be his home for the next year. The house looked like something from an old movie. It had tall windows, wooden shutters that needed paint, and a front porch that creaked when he walked on it. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had explained that the house was built in 1923 and had been home to college students for the past 15 years. "You'll love it here," Mr. Chen had said while handing Jake the keys. "The walls have character, and so do the people who live here." Jake wasn't sure what that meant, but he needed a place to stay, and this house was all he could afford on his part-time job salary and student loans. His room was on the second floor, right at the top of the stairs. It was small, but had good light from 2 windows that looked out onto the street. The wooden floors made soft sounds when he walked across them, and the old radiator in the corner hissed quietly during cold mornings. The first week passed without him meeting his roommates properly. He saw them in passing, quick hellos in the kitchen, nods on the stairs, the sound of doors closing. There was Tom, a business student who was always on his phone talking about investments. There was Lisa, who studied art and left colorful paint stains on the bathroom sink. And then there was Maya. Maya lived in the room directly across from his. Their doors faced each other with maybe 6 feet of hallway between them. Jake noticed her schedule was completely different from everyone else's. While he was getting ready for his morning classes, she was just getting home. While he was settling down for the night around 10, she was getting dressed to leave. "I work at the campus library," she had explained one evening when they bumped into each other in the kitchen. "Night shift pays better, and it's quieter. I can study while I work." She was studying psychology, which explained all the thick textbooks Jake saw her carrying. Maya was average height with long dark hair that she usually kept in a ponytail. She had a quiet way of speaking, like she was always thinking carefully about her words before saying them. The house itself seemed to have its own personality. The stairs creaked in specific spots. The 3rd step from the bottom always groaned, and the 7th step from the top squeaked like a mouse. The front door didn't close properly unless you lifted it slightly while pushing. The bathroom faucet in the hall took 30 seconds to warm up, and the kitchen light flickered twice before staying on. Jake learned these quirks during his first month. He also learned that Maya collected old books. Not textbooks, but actual old books with worn covers and yellow pages. Her room was across from his, and sometimes when her door was open, he could see tall stacks of books covering most surfaces. "I love old stories," she had said when he asked about it one day. "Especially books about dreams and sleep. People in the past had such interesting ideas about why we dream." It was an odd hobby, Jake thought, but everyone had their interests. Maya seemed harmless enough, even if she was a bit mysterious. The thing that Jake found most interesting about Maya was how quiet she moved around the house. Tom stomped when he walked, and Lisa's art supplies always made noise when she carried them upstairs. But Maya seemed to glide through the hallways without making a sound. Sometimes Jake would be in his room and suddenly realize she was home, even though he never heard her come up the stairs. "How do you move so quietly?" he asked her once. Maya smiled in that thoughtful way she had. "I've always been light on my feet. My family used to joke that I could sneak up on anyone." As October turned colder, Jake settled into a routine. He had classes in the morning, worked at a local coffee shop in the afternoon, and spent evenings studying in his room. He was usually asleep by 11 because his first class started at 8 in the morning. Maya's schedule remained mysterious. She left around 9 at night and came home sometime before dawn. Jake knew this because he was a light sleeper, and even though Maya moved quietly, the old house always made some noise when someone came home. The front door, the stairs, the settling sounds of old wood. But lately something felt different. Jake couldn't put his finger on what exactly had changed. He was sleeping more restlessly than usual. Some mornings he woke up feeling like he hadn't slept at all, even though he'd been in bed for 8 hours. Other mornings he woke up with the strange feeling that something had happened during the night, but he couldn't remember what. His mom called one evening in late October to check on him. "You sound tired, honey. Are you getting enough sleep?" "I think so," Jake said, though he wasn't really sure anymore. "The house is just taking some getting used to." "Old houses can be noisy," his mom said. "Maybe you need earplugs." Jake considered this, but noise wasn't really the problem. The house was actually quite peaceful at night. It was more like his brain wouldn't fully shut off. He'd lie in bed feeling alert, listening to every small sound, waiting for something without knowing what. Maya had been acting differently too. During their brief encounters in the kitchen or hallway, she seemed distracted. She would look at him with an expression he couldn't read, like she wanted to say something but changed her mind. A few times he caught her staring at him with that same puzzled look. "Everything okay?" he had asked her one morning when he found her standing in the kitchen, just staring at the coffee maker. "Oh yes," she said quickly, snapping back to attention, just thinking about a project for school. But Jake noticed she poured her coffee and left without drinking any of it. The strangest thing happened on a Thursday evening. Jake had been studying late and decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed that Maya's light was on and her door was slightly open. He could hear her talking to someone, but her voice sounded different than usual. She was speaking in a monotone way, almost like she was reading from a script. He couldn't make out the words clearly, and he didn't want to eavesdrop, so he continued to the kitchen. But as he filled his water glass, he realized he hadn't heard another voice responding to Maya. She seemed to be talking to herself, or maybe she was on the phone. When he walked back past her room a few minutes later, everything was quiet and dark. Jake went to bed that night with more questions than answers about his mysterious roommate across the hall. 3 weeks had passed since Jake moved into the old house, and something was definitely wrong with his sleep. It started small, just waking up once or twice during the night. But now it was happening every single night, always around the same time. Jake had always been a good sleeper. Back home with his mom, he could sleep through thunderstorms and the neighbors' loud music. But here, in this old house, his body seemed to be on high alert all the time. Every night, without fail, he would wake up at exactly midnight, not 11:58 or 12:03, but right at midnight. He would sit up in bed, completely awake, as if someone had shaken him. The room would be dark and quiet, but something felt off. It was like the feeling you get when you think someone is watching you, but when you turn around, no one is there. Jake tried everything he could think of. He bought blackout curtains to make the room darker. He got a white noise machine to block out any sounds from the house. He even tried drinking chamomile tea before bed like his mom used to make when he was sick. Nothing worked. The worst part was how tired he felt during the day. His morning classes became torture sessions where he struggled to keep his eyes open. His afternoon shifts at the coffee shop were even worse. He made simple mistakes like putting salt in the sugar dispenser and forgetting customers' orders 2 minutes after taking them. "You look terrible," his coworker Danny said one afternoon. "When's the last time you got a good night's sleep?" "I honestly can't remember," Jake replied, rubbing his eyes. "I think someone put a curse on me." Danny laughed, but Jake wasn't entirely joking. He was starting to wonder if living in this old house was affecting him somehow. The strange thing was that nothing in his room ever looked different when he woke up. His books were still in the same place on his desk. His clothes were still folded, the same way in his drawer. His door was always closed, just like he left it. But every morning, Jake had the strongest feeling that someone had been in his room while he slept. He started keeping a notebook by his bed to write down anything unusual. Most nights, he wrote the same thing. "Woke up at midnight. Room seems normal. Feel like someone was here." After 2 weeks of identical entries, Jake wondered if he was losing his mind. Maya's behavior was getting stranger too. She had always been quiet, but now she seemed almost ghostly. Jake would see her in the hallway one moment, and the next moment she would be gone, like she had vanished into thin air. One morning, Jake was brushing his teeth when Maya appeared in the bathroom doorway. He hadn't heard her footsteps or the door opening. "You look tired," she said, studying his face in the mirror. "Haven't been sleeping well," Jake mumbled through his toothbrush. Maya tilted her head slightly like she was thinking about something. Have you always been a light sleeper? It was an odd question. Actually, no. I usually sleep like a rock. This house is just different. Different how? Jake spit out his toothpaste and turned to face her. I don't know. I wake up every night at midnight and I can't figure out why. It's like my body has an alarm clock that I can't turn off. Maya's expression changed. For just a moment she looked surprised, maybe even worried, but then her face went back to its usual calm look. Old houses can be unsettling, she said. Maybe. You should talk to someone about it. Like who? A doctor, maybe, or someone who knows about sleep problems. Jake found this suggestion interesting. Do you know someone like that? Maya paused. My psychology professor, Dr. Rodriguez, studies sleep patterns. She might have some advice. That would be great, actually. I'm willing to try anything at this point. I'll ask her, Maya said, but something in her voice sounded hesitant. Later that week, Jake was in the kitchen making dinner when Tom came home looking excited. You guys want to hear something weird? Tom said, dropping his backpack on the counter. Always, Lisa said, looking up from her sketchbook. So I was talking to this guy in my economics class, and he used to live in this house 2 years ago. He said the weirdest thing happened to him when he lived here. Jake stopped stirring his pasta. What kind of weird thing? He said he would wake up every night at the same time feeling like someone had been in his room. But nothing was ever missing or moved. He thought he was going crazy. The wooden spoon slipped from Jake's hand and clattered on the floor. Lisa and Tom looked at him with concern. Are you okay? Lisa asked. Jake picked up the spoon with shaking hands. Did he say what time he woke up? Yeah, actually he did. Midnight. Every night. Why? Jake felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The same thing is happening to me. Every single night for 3 weeks. Tom's eyes widened. Seriously? That's so strange. Did he figure out what was causing it? Jake asked. He never did. He moved out after a semester because he couldn't take the sleep loss anymore. That night, Jake lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The clock on his nightstand showed 11:47. In 13 minutes, he would wake up again, just like every other night. But now he knew he wasn't crazy. Something was definitely happening in this house, and it had happened to other people too. He decided to do something different. Instead of trying to sleep, he would stay awake and wait. Maybe if he was already awake at midnight, he could figure out what was waking him up every night. Jake propped himself up on his pillows and watched the clock. 11:52, 11:55, 11:58. His heart started beating faster as midnight approached. 11:59. Then, at exactly midnight, Jake heard something that made his blood run cold. It was the soft sound of his doorknob turning. Someone was trying to open his door. Jake's heart pounded so hard he thought it might wake the whole house. He lay perfectly still in his bed, watching his doorknob slowly turn in the dim light that came through his window from the street lamp outside. The door opened with the softest whisper of sound. Jake had never noticed how quietly that old door could move. Usually it creaked when he opened it during the day, but now it moved like it was floating on air. A figure stepped into his room. Even in the darkness, Jake could tell it was Maya. But something was wrong with the way she moved. During the day, Maya walked normally, but now she moved in a strange, flowing way, like she was sleepwalking in a movie. Jake wanted to say something, wanted to ask her what she was doing, but his voice was completely gone. It was like his throat had forgotten how to make sounds. All he could do was lie there and watch as Maya moved closer to his bed. She wasn't looking at him exactly. Her eyes were open, but they seemed to be focused on something Jake couldn't see. It was the strangest thing. She was clearly awake because she was walking around, but her face had the peaceful expression of someone who was deep asleep. Maya stopped right next to his bed. Jake could see her clearly now in the dim light. She was wearing pajamas and no shoes, and her long hair hung loose around her shoulders. Her breathing was slow and steady, but Jake's breathing had almost stopped completely. Then Maya did something that Jake would remember for the rest of his life. She leaned down close to his face, so close that he could feel her breath on his cheek. And she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was gentle and peaceful, but also somehow empty, like she was smiling at a pleasant dream only she could see. Jake wanted to move, wanted to sit up or say her name, but he felt frozen. Part of him was terrified, but another part was fascinated. Maya clearly had no idea where she was or what she was doing. This had to be sleepwalking, but Jake had never seen anything like it. Maya stayed leaning over him for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Then she did something even stranger. She reached out with one hand and gently touched his wrist, right where his pulse would be. Her fingers were cool and soft, and Jake realized she was counting something under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. She whispered so quietly that Jake almost didn't hear it. Her voice sounded different than during the day, more distant, like it was coming from far away. After counting to 20, Maya straightened up. But she didn't leave right away. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her pajama top and pulled out something small. Jake couldn't see what it was in the darkness, but he watched as she carefully placed it under his pillow, right next to his head. The whole time, Maya's face kept that same peaceful, sleeping smile. Her eyes were open but seemed to be looking at something that wasn't really there. Then, as quietly as she had entered, Maya turned and walked back toward the door. She moved with that same strange, flowing walk, like she was floating just above the floor. At the doorway, she paused for just a moment as if she was listening for something. Then she stepped out into the hallway and closed the door behind her with the same silent touch. Jake lay in his bed for several minutes, not moving at all. His heart was still pounding, and he wasn't sure if what he had just seen was real or if he was having the most vivid dream of his life. Finally, he reached under his pillow to see what Maya had left there. His fingers found a small, flat object. He pulled it out and held it up to the window where he could see it in the streetlight. It was a small electronic device about the size of a coin, but thicker. Jake had never seen anything exactly like it, but it looked like some kind of sensor or monitor. There were tiny lights on one side that weren't glowing now, but Jake could see the little bulbs. What was Maya doing with electronic devices? And why had she put one under his pillow while she was sleepwalking? Jake set the device on his nightstand and tried to think. Maya studied psychology, and she had mentioned that her professor studied sleep patterns. Could this device be related to that somehow? A terrible thought occurred to Jake. What if Maya hadn't been sleepwalking at all? What if she had been pretending, and she was actually conducting some kind of experiment on him while he slept? But that didn't make sense either. The way Maya had moved, the expression on her face, the way she had counted his pulse, everything about it seemed genuine. Jake had seen sleepwalking on TV and in movies, but this was different. Maya had seemed so peaceful, so completely unaware of what she was really doing. Jake picked up the device again and examined it more closely. On one side, there were tiny letters that he could barely make out in the dim light. It looked like it said, "Sleep Study Monitor," and had some numbers below that. A sleep study monitor. Maya was studying psychology, and her professor researched sleep patterns. The pieces were starting to come together, but Jake still didn't understand the full picture. Had Maya been coming into his room every night for 3 weeks? Was that why he kept waking up at midnight, because she was there, monitoring him somehow? Jake felt a mix of emotions. He was angry that someone had been entering his room without permission, but he was also confused because Maya had clearly been sleepwalking. If she was asleep, then she didn't know what she was doing, right? And there was something else. During the day, Maya always seemed tired, just like Jake did, just like if she was sleepwalking and visiting his room every night, then she probably wasn't getting good sleep either. Jake looked at his clock. It was 12:15 in the morning. He could hear soft footsteps in the hallway, Maya going back to her room. Everything was quiet now, but Jake knew he wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. His mind was spinning with too many questions. He got up and walked quietly to his door, pressing his ear against it to listen. He could hear Maya's door close across the hall with a soft click. Then everything was silent again. Jake went back to his bed and sat on the edge, holding the small device in his hands. Tomorrow, He would have to talk to Maya about this. But what would he say? Hey, you've been sleepwalking into my room every night and leaving electronic devices under my pillow? It sounded crazy even in his own head. Jake finally lay back down, but he kept the device on his nightstand where he could see it. Every few minutes he would look over at it to make sure it was still there, to make sure he hadn't imagined the whole thing. As the hours passed, Jake realized that his midnight wake-ups finally made sense. His body had been sensing Maya's presence in his room even while he was asleep. Some part of his mind had been aware that someone was there, and it had been waking him up to protect him. But now Jake had even bigger questions. How long had Maya been sleepwalking? Was she doing research on all the roommates or just him? And most importantly, did Maya have any idea what she was doing while she slept? Jake finally drifted off to sleep just as the sun was starting to rise. But his dreams were filled with quiet footsteps and peaceful, mysterious smiles. Jake barely slept for the rest of the night. Every few minutes he would look at the small device on his nightstand, making sure it was still there. When morning finally came, he felt exhausted but determined. He needed answers, and he needed them today. He waited until he heard Maya moving around in her room across the hall. Usually she slept until late afternoon because of her night shift at the library, but today she seemed to be up earlier than usual. Jake took a deep breath, picked up the sleep monitor, and walked across the hall. He knocked gently on Maya's door. "Come in," Maya's voice called from inside. Jake opened the door and stepped into her room. It was the first time he had actually been inside, and he was surprised by what he saw. Books were everywhere, not just on shelves but stacked on the floor, on her desk, even on her windowsill. Most of them looked old and worn, with titles about dreams, sleep, and psychology. Maya was sitting on her bed in pajamas, looking tired and confused. Her hair was messy from sleep and she had dark circles under her eyes that Jake had never noticed before. "Good morning," Jake said, feeling nervous about how to start this conversation. "Morning," Maya replied, but she looked puzzled. "Is everything okay? You look upset." Jake held up the small device. "I think you left this in my room last night." Maya stared at the monitor for a long moment, and Jake watched her face change from confusion to shock to something that looked like fear. Where did you find that?" she asked quietly. "Under my pillow. You put it there around midnight." Maya's hands started shaking. "That's impossible. I was at work last night until 3 in the morning. "Maya," Jake said gently, "I saw you. You came into my room while you were sleepwalking." The word sleepwalking hit Maya like a physical blow. She put her hands over her face and started to cry. Not loud sobs, but quiet tears that made Jake feel terrible for confronting her. "Oh no," she whispered through her fingers. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." Jake sat down on the edge of her bed, keeping some distance but wanting to help. "Maya, it's okay. You weren't doing anything wrong. You were just asleep." "You don't understand," Maya said, wiping her eyes. "I haven't sleepwalked since I was 12 years old. My parents took me to doctors and they said I had grown out of it. But you were definitely sleepwalking last night. You seemed completely peaceful, like you were having a nice dream." Maya looked up at him with red, puffy eyes. "What exactly did I do?" Jake felt uncomfortable describing it, but Maya deserved to know. "You came into my room very quietly. You leaned over my bed and smiled, but it was like you were looking at something I couldn't see. Then you checked my pulse and counted to 20. After that, you put the device under my pillow and left." Maya's crying got harder. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. I invaded your privacy, and I didn't even know I was doing it." "Where did this device come from?" Jake asked, holding up the monitor. Maya was quiet for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to tell him the truth. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "I'm part of a research study with my psychology professor, Dr. Rodriguez. She's studying sleep patterns in college students, and she gave me some monitoring equipment to use on volunteers." "Volunteers?" "People who agreed to be part of the study. But Jake, I swear I never put you on the volunteer list. I never gave anyone permission to monitor your sleep." Jake was starting to understand. So how did the device end up under my pillow? I must have been sleepwalking and taking the research equipment with me, Maya said miserably. But I don't understand why. When I was a kid, I would sleepwalk to the kitchen or the living room. I never went into other people's bedrooms. How long has this been happening? The research study started about a month ago, right around the time you moved in. Dr. Rodriguez gave me several monitors and asked me to test them on willing participants. Jake thought about this. I've been waking up every night at midnight for 3 weeks. Maya's face went pale. 3 weeks? Oh my God, Jake. I've been violating your privacy for 3 weeks and I had no idea. Have you been sleepwalking other nights too? I don't know. That's the terrible part about sleepwalking. You have no memory of it. I could have been doing this every single night, and I would never know unless someone told me. Jake looked around Maya's room again, noticing details he had missed before. There were research papers scattered on her desk with titles like Sleep Monitoring in Natural Environments and Unconscious Data Collection During Sleep States. What kind of research is Dr. Rodriguez doing exactly? Maya wiped her nose with a tissue. She's trying to understand how people's sleep patterns change when they live with roommates. She thinks that living with other people affects the quality and timing of sleep, even if we're not aware of it. And she asked you to monitor your roommates? Not exactly. She asked me to find volunteers who would be willing to wear sleep monitors for a few weeks. I was supposed to get their permission first and explain what the study was about. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. But instead, you've been monitoring me while sleepwalking, without my permission or knowledge. Yes, Maya whispered. And it gets worse. How could it get worse? Maya got up and walked to her desk, picking up a thick notebook. She brought it back to the bed and opened it. Jake could see pages of handwritten notes, charts, and graphs. I've been keeping a sleep research journal for the study, but look at this. She flipped to a section near the back of the notebook. Jake saw his name at the top of several pages, followed by detailed notes about sleep patterns, times, and even things like subject appears restless and increased movement during REM cycles. You've been writing about my sleep behavior? I must have been writing these notes after my sleepwalking episodes, but I don't remember writing any of this. It's like there's a part of me that's conducting research while I'm asleep. Jake felt sick to his stomach. Maya, this is really serious. You've been studying me like a lab animal without my knowledge. I know, and I feel horrible about it. But Jake, I think something is wrong with me. Normal sleepwalking doesn't involve complex activities like data collection and note-taking. Just then there was a knock on Maya's bedroom door. Both Jake and Maya froze. Maya, are you in there? Came a woman's voice from the hallway. It's Dr. Rodriguez. I came by to check on your research progress. Maya and Jake looked at each other with panic in their eyes. Maya quickly closed the notebook and whispered, She can't know that you found out about this. The research study could get in trouble. Maya? Dr. Rodriguez called again. I saw that some of the monitoring equipment hasn't been returned. We need to talk. Maya stood up and straightened her pajamas. Just a minute, Dr. Rodriguez, she called back. She turned to Jake and whispered urgently, Please don't tell her what happened. Let me figure out how to handle this first. But Jake wasn't sure he could stay quiet about this. He had been unknowingly part of a psychology experiment for 3 weeks, and now the person running the experiment was standing right outside the door. Dr. Rodriguez turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a cardigan and comfortable shoes, looking more like someone's favorite aunt than a research scientist. But when she saw Jake in Maya's room, her expression became very serious. I'm sorry, Dr. Rodriguez said, looking between Maya and Jake. I didn't realize you had company. I can come back later. Actually, Jake said, making a decision that surprised himself, I think I should be part of this conversation. Maya shot him a worried look, but Jake continued. My name is Jake, and I live across the hall. I think I might be part of your research study. Dr. Rodriguez looked confused. I'm sorry, but that's not possible. Maya hasn't submitted any participant consent forms yet. We haven't officially started data collection. Jake held up the sleep monitoring device. Then how do you explain this? I found it under my pillow this morning. The professor's face went completely white. She looked at the device, then at Maya, then back at Jake. Maya, she said quietly, please tell me you didn't monitor someone without their consent. Maya started crying again. I didn't mean to, Dr. Rodriguez. I've been sleepwalking again, and I think I've been taking the research equipment with me. Doctor. Rodriguez sat down heavily in Maya's desk chair. Oh dear, this is much more serious than I thought. Over the next hour, the three of them sat in Maya's room while the whole story came out. Maya explained about her childhood sleepwalking, how it had stopped for years, and how it seemed to have started again around the time she joined the research study. Dr. Rodriguez listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes. Maya, why didn't you tell me you had a history of sleepwalking? That would have been important information for this study. I didn't think it mattered, Maya said. It stopped when I was 12. I thought I had grown out of it. Sleepwalking can return during times of stress or when sleep patterns are disrupted, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Starting college, living with new people, working night shifts, all of these could trigger sleepwalking episodes. Jake had been mostly listening, but now he had a question. Dr. Rodriguez, is it normal for sleepwalkers to do complex activities like data collection? The professor shook her head. Not typically, no. Most sleepwalking involves simple, familiar activities. What Maya has been doing sounds more like what we call complex sleepwalking behavior. It's rare, but it can happen, especially in people who are deeply involved in their work or studies. So Maya's brain was basically doing research while she was asleep? It's possible. The part of her brain that learned the research procedures was still active during her sleepwalking episodes. But this creates a serious ethical problem. Dr. Rodriguez turned to Jake. I owe you a sincere apology. You were monitored without your knowledge or consent, which violates every principle of ethical research. I take full responsibility for not properly screening Maya before including her in this study. Jake appreciated the apology, but he was more concerned about Maya. She looked exhausted and defeated, like she thought her academic career was over. What happens now? Jake asked. Dr. Rodriguez sighed. First, I need to suspend the research study immediately. Second, I need to report this incident to the university's ethics board. And third, Maya needs to see a sleep specialist about her sleepwalking. Will Maya get in trouble? Jake asked. That's not up to me to decide, Dr. Rodriguez said gently. But I will make it clear in my report that Maya had no conscious intention to violate research protocols. Maya finally spoke up. Dr. Rodriguez, I want to withdraw from the study completely. I can't risk this happening again. I think that's wise. The professor agreed. Maya, you're a talented student with a bright future in psychology, but you need to take care of your health first. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Jake and Maya sat in her room in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Maya spoke. I understand if you want me to move out, she said quietly. I violated your privacy in the worst way possible. Jake had been thinking about this. Maya, you were sleepwalking. You had no control over what you were doing. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But it also doesn't make you a bad person. Maya looked up at him with surprise. You're not angry with me? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer. I was angry at first, but then I realized that you've been suffering too. You look exhausted, Maya. You've probably been getting even less sleep than me. It was true. Maya had dark circles under her eyes and looked like she hadn't had a good night's rest in weeks. I've been so tired lately, Maya admitted. But I thought it was just from working night shifts. When you sleepwalk, do you actually get rest? I don't think so. I wake up feeling like I've been busy all night, but I never knew why. Jake made another decision that surprised himself. Maya, I want to help you. Help me how? Let's figure out how to stop your sleepwalking. Maybe we can put a bell on your door or something so you wake up if you try to leave your room at night. Maya stared at him. Why would you want to help me after what I did? Jake thought about this question. Because I think you're a good person who got caught up in a bad situation, and because everyone deserves to sleep peacefully at night. Over the next few days, Jake and Maya worked together to find solutions. They researched sleepwalking prevention techniques online. Maya got a door alarm that would beep if she tried to open her door while sleepwalking. Jake moved his bed away from the wall that connected to Maya's room just in case. Most importantly, Maya made an appointment at the campus health center to talk to a counselor about her sleepwalking. She learned that stress and irregular sleep schedules were major triggers, so she decided to quit her night shift job and find work during regular daytime hours. 3 weeks later, Jake was sleeping normally again. He no longer woke up at midnight, and he felt rested in the mornings. Maya seemed to be doing better too. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and she was smiling more often. One evening, Jake found a handwritten note that had been slipped under his door. It was from Maya. Jake, it read, I can never fully apologize for what happened, but I want you to know how grateful I am for your kindness. You could have made this situation much worse for me, but instead, you helped me find a solution. I'm sleeping peacefully now for the first time in months, and I think you are too. Thank you for seeing the best in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Your friend always, Maya. Jake smiled as he read the note. Living with strangers had turned out to be more complicated than he expected, but it had also taught him something important about forgiveness and understanding. That night, Jake went to bed at his usual time and slept soundly until morning. Across the hall, Maya did the same. The old house was finally peaceful, and both of them were exactly where they belonged.